Well, hello and welcome to this edition of the Religion Hurts podcast. My name is Mike Harrison, and I'm super excited to have you with me today. I'm super excited. I like picking on things sometimes in Christianese, I call it, but just in different things. I'm not a really super excited type of guy most times, so I'm happy to have you with me today, and we'll pick on my own words. And I say I pick on Christianese things because Christians have little ways of saying things, but I think we all do in different things. And so to say I'm super excited, I'm happy to have you here. I'm thankful you're here, and thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening to me to ramble on about my own views on words and things there for a moment. In this episode, I'm actually going to talk about the very first, just getting to the group and kind of what that was like. It's kind of a painful memory, obviously, for lots of reasons. And try to keep this video a hair shorter than the other ones. We'll see how that goes. So I think in the last video I talked a lot about kind of the relationship with Chris and Brenda and what they had done and kind of the grooming process as to what it's like. I don't think many, maybe sometimes people go into this stuff like just boom, just fast. But I think most of the time it comes from a bit of a grooming process, where there's something that's missing in your life. These people start to fill that need. And, was there? Oh, excuse me. So sorry. I'm working on a job site here in Minnesota, as I have been. And it's a nice rainy day, but today I did some tearing out of some plaster and different things. And so I think the dust just got to me a little bit, but I apologize. Anyways, so the grooming process is something, that it doesn't just happen super fast, right? It takes time. You've got something, you got a hole, you got something that you're needing. Whether you get into the NXIVM cult or to any of these things, it kind of all has the same process. Somebody spent time, grooming another person or grooming a group of people or hitting a need for people. And essentially it brings out, brings them to a spot where these people, like me in this situation, me and my wife, this group has something that you believe with all your heart that you're missing. And because of that, you go to pursue it with everything you are. And so I was talking a little bit about that process and how over a few trips and then just seeing the difference in my dad and hearing what my brother, who I really trusted at the time, had to say and just different things. Christy's younger sister, Mary, had ended up there. She was going to college and she had gone through some really hard times and some difficult things. And she was good friends with, so how would I put this? A lot of the core group, I think I kind of alleged to, eventually was a lot of my relatives, and there was others that weren't. But my Uncle Hank, who had been in a business relationship with my brother Chris, Hank and his wife Liz had 6 kids. And Hank and Liz went and were part of the group. And kind of early on, because he was good friends with Don Van Bodegum, as I had said. And so Hank was probably the one that introduced just about everybody to this group at some point, of the ones that are there now, or of our family anyway. And so he went with his wife and 6 kids who were all either teenagers or early adults, young adults. And then my brother Chris and his wife Elaine and their 2 daughters went. Then eventually my mom and dad, after my dad came out of my mom early on, I think, and my dad, as he came out of the hospital, out of the lung transplant, then my parents got involved. And then I had a sister, my youngest sister had gone through a divorce and a whole bunch of situations. She had 2 sons that she lost in a custody battle with her husband and was obviously feeling pretty broken and lost. So she ended up out there as well, living with them. And so you have quite a bit of family just in that. And then there was a bunch of other people in the group. You don't need to know all of them, but I'm only bringing up the family ones because they're obviously kind of they're important to our story and our track line here. So anyways, so they go and they're part of all this, and for quite some time, they're out there working. Both Chris and Hank were working for Don for a while, and when that ended, they were partly living off of life savings and doing some other stuff, but they got super involved with the group. And Mary, my sister-in-law, had gotten to know my cousins. These, be Leah, Mandy, and Jocelyn were the name of the three oldest girl cousins, and they're all pretty close in age themselves. They were all young adults, like anywhere between, I don't know for sure their ages, but probably somewhere around that 17 to 20 range, maybe a little bit older, somewhere in there. And Mary was good friends with these girls and had gotten to know them well and had gotten to talking to them. Well, unfortunately, Mary had come home from, and I say this unfortunately, I'll tell you why in a second. Mary had come home from college. She was going to college in New Mexico, and she had come home for college for a break. And my brother and Hank had decided to come for a visit, that they just wanted to, I don't know, just, the words they would use is minister to us. I think it's part of the grooming process. I think, for whatever reason, Chris Harrison was really interested in getting me and Christy there. And so, and financially, we're giving a little bit of tithe money to them. So maybe partly to just gain more support, or I'm not even 100% sure the motive, but Chris and Hank decided to come visit, and they were at our house for about a week, maybe a little less, but regardless, they were there. And Mary happened to come home from college, and she was really hurting, and nobody knew this at the time, but she was really struggling with different stuff. And she heard Hank talking about something, and she got really intrigued by it. So unbeknownst to anybody, she talked to him about, could I come out for a visit out there? And they said, well, yeah, of course you can come for a visit. So she decided to go for a visit to Ontario. And Mary was always a little bit flighty, always kind of a little bit wherever, a little bit of a just kind of go with the flow, kind of adventurous. She'd been to Venezuela and Bosnia and different stuff on mission trips and whatever else. She's very willing to just kind of last minute make decisions and go different places. So nobody was a ton surprised about that. But she's like, okay, I've still got some time off from school, so I'm just going to go visit. So she goes out and visits. And next thing we're hearing is everything she's ever looked for. And she decides to stay in Ontario. She decides that she's not going to go back to school for that semester. She's going to drop out of that semester and stay for that semester and just go there and just be there, because it's everything she's wanted. And I think that had a profound impact on Christy, because this was her sister. And at first we were all kind of concerned, but at the same time, remember, we're being groomed ourselves and thinking like, wow, there must be something here if even Mary is being attracted to this. And, it should have been huge flags for us, but unfortunately all it did is solidify for us that there was something that was going on here that was really big. So Christy and I were talking about this the other night, trying to remember the specific reason we went to Ontario for this trip. And we don't actually really remember the reason, but we decided to go out to Ontario for a week and go see everybody, and just go see Mary, go see my brother and Hank, go just see the group. I know that they had been quietly putting a bunch of pressure on me regarding that I needed to make some changes in my life. And they didn't really have any reasons, but just that, look, God's about to do something new and you're messing around in life. And do you really just want to pursue building a small construction business when God's got more? Like, you should be about bigger picture things. And when you get around the charismatic churches, this can be a really common thing, that there's people that very much believe that your purpose in life must be X or Y, and it's everything that you do in life has to be geared towards a purpose that furthers the kingdom, or brings people to know Jesus, right? But that's the terminology is bringing people to know Jesus, or seeing people set free of sin and whatever. That's advancing the kingdom, kind of like you're a war kind of thing. And they're always talking about that, like, we're in a war, we're in a war against the devil, we're in a war against sin, we're in a war against all these different things. What's your place? What's your position? What are you doing to advance the kingdom? What are you doing to fight for the things of God? And one of the things that I learned in counseling actually is the counselor said to me, our purpose on earth actually is for a relationship with God, but everything else comes out of that. Like, you become a better husband, you become a better father, you become a better employee or employer. Everything in your life should be enhanced by a relationship with God. And yes, there's some people that I believe are called to be pastors or to teach or to do specific things. I think missionaries are important. But that's not everybody's call. Everybody's call is to have a relationship with God. And I actually do agree with that. But not everybody's call is to have to do this big, expensive thing. I think sometimes just being a really good husband and father or wife and mother or sister or daughter or brother or son or whatever, I think a lot of times that really is the thing that matters most, Be that person that shows up to work and has high integrity and cares about what they're doing and has some peace and happiness in life and goes camping with their kids and it just enjoys being alive and treats their wife with respect and dignity and kindness. And like, I think the relationship with God should lead to all those things and not necessarily this overwhelming pressure to go be this other thing. Well, I must go do all this stuff. And so, again, I'm not putting anything against people that have that calling in their life, that they really believe that God's calling them to pastor, to do those things. I think that's an awesome thing that they're doing. But I think when it's done right, you can see the fruit of it done right. And when it's not done right, and it's done for this is where my position is. It becomes about me and not about God, if that makes sense. And I really believe that when we pursue it for that reason, sort of my little side rant here, but I really believe that when we pursue a position for our benefit, we're missing what it is. Because having a relationship with God, honestly, I really truly believe this with all my heart. If the relationship with God is right, there's nothing else that needs to happen. It's like, if the relationship with your wife is healthy, I don't need to be making millions of dollars to make sure that she's got a good wife good life as a wife. I don't need to take her on 5 vacations a year or do this or do any of these specific things. Now, you might, and maybe you are making $1 million, awesome. But if you and your wife have a good relationship, the reality is that's often enough. Christy and I were reflecting on being newlyweds and remembering what it was like to have no money, living in an apartment. You have no money, so you can't afford to hardly go out to eat. You can't really afford to do a whole lot of things because you're just brand new in life, right? Like Christy was going to school and I was working, and we had enough money to pay our rent and have groceries and stuff. But we didn't have a lot left over. We're young, right? And it was enough. It didn't matter to us if we had the fanciest cars because we were just newlyweds. We were just happily in love, right? Like that, I really believe translates. And we're reminded that even now, some of our best date nights are going with friends to Topgolf or to New Ulm or recent things that we did that were just a lot of fun, but they didn't cost a ton, but they were just super enjoyable. Or sometimes we watched, for those Canadians that are listening, we watched Anne of Green Gables the other night, and we just had fun doing it. And those are great experiences because time with her is enough. Time with her is enough for our relationship. That's all I want and need. Well, why? Because I think that we fought to make each other, to just have relationship with each other. And because of that, time together is everything. The relationship is enough. We don't have to do something else to make the relationship good. And I really believe it's the same way with God. I think it's the same way if you have a healthy relationship with your kids or your parents. You don't have to do something to be a good son. You don't have to, buy your kids all the greatest things in the world to be a good dad. Having a relationship with your kids, and loving them unconditionally makes you a great dad, not all the other stuff. And so I've seen plenty of poor dads that were amazing and plenty of rich dads that were horrible, and vice versa, honestly. That's not what makes it be that, right? So Anyways, I digress a little bit here. So, sorry for my little rabbit trail there, but I think it's important. And so we went up for this visit to go see everything, but obviously we were in a hole and feeling this pressure all the time of we're not doing what's necessary, because at that point in time we believed so strongly, what's your position, what's your place. We were taught and trained so much, especially as a man. I was taught so much that either you're meant to be in ministry, and that means pastor or teacher or worship leader or whatever, or you're meant to be in business to make money to support ministries. So you're either in the kingdom or you're in this world, but you're meant to do one or the other. And that's what your goals in life should be, is you're either advancing the kingdom this way or you're doing it through finances. That's what matters. And in a way, I wasn't really doing either. I felt like, I had a good job and stuff, but I just felt like, especially after the whole experience of trying to be a pastor and failing pretty bad, I was like, okay, well, I need to do something. And so and my brother kept challenging me, like, the end times are coming, this is happening, all this different stuff. And this would be like over a year, 2 years, right? These conversations, bang, 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 once a week, hearing all this stuff and all this pressure. And then all the things that happened with finding out that my brother-in-law, I think I mentioned that before, the big defining moment for us was we found out that Christy, my wife, says I shouldn't really say anything specifically. We found out somebody had gotten sexually assaulted, and it really shook me. And I didn't really understand at the time why so personally. I'm a very big protector, and I really, the people that are in my life that I care about, I want to be very safe. And so, yes, that way, but also I had gone through it myself. And when we went to the parents of the person that had gone through this, there was no response. There was no anything. And I was right back to being that little boy myself that had gone through it, and nobody protected me. And what an overwhelming feeling. And I couldn't have articulated that at the time. I didn't know how to put it into words. I just knew that that's where I was. So we go out shortly after this to Ontario to go, and it was in the fall. I know that, close to Canadian Thanksgiving, a couple weeks before Canadian Thanksgiving. We went out to Ontario to go visit, and we're out there, and we're starting to feel this everywhere we go, every second of every day, whether we're at the farm with Chris and Brenda, or we stayed at Christy Lane's house, and whether I'm there with them, and whether I'm wherever, small groups, anything, we're just being told again and again and again, Mike, you belong here. Mike, you belong here. You should be here. This is everything. And then, Christy and I remember specifically been there about 4 days, and my brother just shared his testimony of how he had left everything and moved out there, and how it had been the greatest thing that he ever did, and he wanted to do this with me. And so I went back, and I don't know all what Christy's conversations were, but she'd had some conversations that were very similar. And I got back and I saw her that night, and she said, Mike, I really believe also that we're supposed to move here. So I said, okay, well then let's start to make a decision to do it. Now, actually, I had a friend that articulated this well. When you're a person of action, whether it's right or wrong, you tend to be somebody that makes an action and pursues action over indecision and patience. And I've definitely in my life been a person of action. So kind of when I made up my mind, I'm like, okay, this is what we got to do. This is what we should do. So the next day I told my brother Chris, I told Chris Harrison, told everybody this is what we're going to do. And so I'm going to go back and we'll go, we were living in a house that my father-in-law owned, that we were paying the mortgage on. And, and truthfully, he'd bought it so that we could eventually buy it from him and done all that, been really kind about it. And it's like, we're going to go back and see about selling that house. And I'm a project manager for his company, so I'm going to see about getting somebody else in that position. And we'll work, maybe in the next 3 to 6 months we'll come out here. And they started really strongly chastising us about how they gave us the scripture of Elisha when Elijah called Elisha and said, follow me. And Elisha said, well, let me go and say goodbye to my family first. Then he said, and then Elijah says, I'll have nothing to do with you if that's what you want to do. And so Elisha instead went and burnt the oxen and the wagons and the tiller and whatever else. He burnt everything up, gave it as a sacrifice to God, and then pursued Elijah. And the analogy was sometimes when God calls you, you have to just burn everything up and just go. And at the time, it really made sense. But this is why it's such a painful memory to me, because it was one of the worst things that I've ever done in my life. It's one of the worst things that I've ever been a part of. And to any of my family, especially my father and mother-in-law, now we've had conversations about it, and they've forgiven us, to their credit. And we're super thankful for that. But what a horrendous thing for us to have done, believing that we were following God. And to all my family, anybody that was affected by this, that listens to this now or down the road, I'm sorry. If I haven't ever said sorry to you in person, I am truly sorry for those actions. And if there's any unforgiveness there, I'd ask, please, that you forgive me for those things, because it wasn't right and it wasn't good. But essentially, Christy decided that she didn't want to go back and face her family, so she stayed in North Dakota. And my dad and Daryl, my cousin, who I was always really close to, he was Hank's oldest son, they went with me to go help me move and go help tell my father-in-law and stuff that we were moving and doing stuff. And so we left. I think it was on a Saturday morning. We left early. And driving from Toronto to North Dakota, you got to go. There's a couple of ways you can go, but the way we went is through Detroit and then down around the lake up through Chicago, and then you go up through Minneapolis and Fargo, Grand Forks over to North Dakota. So that's the track we were on. And actually, I had driven the first big part. I was in, my dad had a GMC, like a Jimmy, like a kind of like a Bronco-like thing, if you remember those little Jimmies. And it was myself, my dad, Daryl, and Daryl had brought his dog. And I had driven, all day up to that point. And so then I was getting tired. So my dad said, well, I'm willing to drive. So, he got into the front seat. And we started driving, and we're going, I think, close to Lansing, Michigan, out on the interstate. And a car went flying by. We were probably going 75 miles an hour, and a car went flying by us on the left side. And then as we were going over top of an overpass, it completely lost control, hit the median on the left, and then came across and hit the guardrail on the right, and then bounced and hit my door, T-boned right into my door in this little Jimmy, spun us around, and we rolled this little Jimmy. And I remember thinking, that's it, we're done. Have I done the right thing? And all that ended up happening as we got out of this accident was my dad had a cut on his hand, had to get a couple stitches, and that was it. And you could see the door where I'd been hit was completely caved in, and somehow never caved in. Never caused me the slightest bit of damage. And I remember just feeling really lost at the time. Like, what are we doing? Is this okay? Is this not okay? Like, what were we thinking? Are we in the right? Are we in the wrong here? And so then Hank came down at Chris Harrison's blessing, because the Jimmy we were driving was with Chris. Hank and Chris came with two vehicles, and Hank brought us his pickup truck. He had a Ford F-150, really nice truck, and he just said, Mike, this is God showing you that that he's with you, because you guys should have all been hurt, and he's protected you. The enemy doesn't want you to do this, and he's protected you, and this is why everything's good. And I mean, so when you're in that state, I mean, okay, this is incredible. I mean, wow, we're really doing the right thing here, and the enemy just tried to take us out. I don't believe any of that now, but at the time, man, it sure did seem to make sense, just solidified everything for us. So that night we got back into that pickup and we drove all the way to Minnesota. One of the worst experiences I had was I walked into my father-in-law's office. We got there on Sunday night, and my father-in-law happened to be at a shop with Nancy, and we walked in and told them that I was quitting my job, that I was moving to Ontario, and that we were moving out of the house, and all of it. And the look on his face was just, oh man, how do you remember what it was like to break somebody's heart, you know? But that's what we did, especially with Christy not being there. And then we had our first son at the time, Callan, who they had other grandkids, but they had no other grandkids that were living close. The only grandkid that lived close to them at that time was my oldest son, Callan. And my father-in-law especially loved to do stuff with Callan and just be around him and just spend time with him and just rip their hearts out. Yeah, it was a tough experience. So we made that choice, unfortunately. And then I gave my 2 weeks notice on the spot, and I worked out the next 2 weeks, put another person in my place as project manager, made all the situation change, did everything differently. My dad and Daryl stayed for a week, helped me clean up my house, sell everything that I could possibly sell, and load whatever I was going to take, which was mostly tools and a few possessions, into the back of a trailer. Oh, forgot to say it. We had a small tool trailer that we actually took with us behind the Jimmy, and somehow that popped off the Jimmy as we rolled, and not a scratch happened to the trailer. I don't even still know how that happened. The trailer just scooted along the road and then stopped there. No damage, none the worse for wear. And so when they brought the truck, we just hooked up to that little trailer and just drove. It was simple. And so stayed for another week, and they helped me get everything. They loaded the truck up, and then they took off. And at the time, I had a pickup truck. Our car was with Christy in Ontario, and I had a pickup. I sold that, sold everything else I could sell. And then I had an old Goldwing, an 84 Honda Goldwing. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I strapped what little bit I had onto the back of the motorcycle and drove away from everything. Just off we went to Ontario. I just spent a couple days. I got there, I think, the morning of Thanksgiving, I want to say, or the day before, the Sunday. I don't remember. Forgive me, family that's watching. I don't remember if Canadian Thanksgiving is on the Sunday or the Monday. But that Sunday is when I got there regardless. And I remember being cold. I remember lots of things, but I left on Thursday night, drove to Grand Forks, and then between Friday and Saturday, I got all the way to Barrie, Ontario, and Sunday morning I pulled into that farm. And the very first thing that happened there, and I think this is important, and I'm going to leave it at the tail end of this, because this will just show you the control. Every single day that I was back in North Dakota, every single one, Chris Harrison would pick up the phone and he'd call me every morning at 5:30 in the morning, and he'd say, "Mike, you are courageous. You are doing what God's calling you to do. I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. You are such an amazing man of God. Very few people would be able to do what you're doing, and I'm just want to let you know that." Every single day he spoke this to me, including while I was driving out there. He would talk to me, and at the time it meant the world. Well, then I got there, and I was sitting in his trailer the morning I got there, feeling like maybe I just had this victory, like feeling like maybe I did the right thing, but of course wrestling with the fact that I hadn't, but feeling like maybe I did, and I pulled it off, and I'm there, and I'm expecting almost the pounding on the back and the congratulations. And I got there, and he said, "Mike, every one of the men that's come to this group has had to do something, and it's your turn to do it now." I'm like, "Oh, okay. What's going on?" And he said, every man that's ever come in here, that what we preach here is death to self. And you've gone your whole marriage with being able to, forgive any graphicness, I'll try to keep it not graphic, be able to have sex with your wife anytime you want. And we've talked to your wife, and you're going to need to go through a period of time until she determines it's good, where she has control of this area of your life. And we want you to give up all sex and all whatever with your wife. You're to sleep in a separate room. You're to be separate from her for a period of time, and not be with her until she's ready to have you do that. And they'd convinced her all the reasons why So now imagine me who had just gone through all this hell for 2 weeks. And I mean, it was hell for 2 weeks. Because every customer, every place I went to, everything I did, well, why are you quitting? Why this? Why that? Every one of the employees. Of course, my in-laws weren't speaking to me at all. Sold everything. I was on the fire department. I was all my friends in town. Everybody was trying to call me and get a hold of me. Why are you leaving? Why are you leaving? Why are you leaving? Why are you leaving? Why, da, 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 da. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. And I find, and Chris Harrison's kindness every morning was enough to get me through, and the belief that I was doing the right thing. And then I burnt every bridge, get there, and then the very first thing I got to do is give up all control of my life. Just like that. Nothing said before. Nothing said anything different. And I was just sitting there going, I have no idea what to do. I have no idea. I'm doing this all because I believe this is right. Now, I can't even be in the same room as my wife. Like, what in the world? And, yeah, that was the first instance into all that. But because I'd sold everything. Now, I think in hindsight, if I had called up my father-in-law and said, I screwed up so bad, this was so wrong, can you forgive me? I think he would have gotten in a car the next day and taken me back. I really do. But at the time, I felt like I'd done exactly like Elisha, burnt the plows and the oxen. And how do you come back from that, right? What a devastating time. So I'll get into what life was like in the cult, I don't know, 1 or 2, 3 episodes, I don't know yet, over the next few, but that just gives you a little bit of a taste of everything up to this point. And so I thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast. I really appreciate everyone that's watching this now or later or whenever. I pray that God blesses you. One little encouragement. If you're around pastors, preachers, others in church, if there's a massive amount of chaos in the life of those pastors and around them and around everything that's happening, just take a moment, take a step back, and just consider what's happening. I'm not saying it's never God, but I would definitely give me cause to question. And if your experience instead is people are strengthened by knowing them, people feel peace and more of a sense of stability and things settled when you're around those people, or that if you can see the people that are around them feel more that way. Again, I'm not saying that that's always God, but those are two thoughts I just want to leave you with, just stuff to consider. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you, love you, and we'll see you next time.